I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off road. The guy managed the group. He was like, "What are you doing in this beautiful car?" I'm like, "I'm going off road." He's like, "Are you sure? Because you can use one of ours." And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability as well as its robust interior are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
Yeah, you listen to podcasts in the car?
Oh yeah, I never listen to music.
When people ask me where do people listen to podcasts, and when I, the little research I've done on this, it's always cars. People always tell me cars and the gym, and obviously people are much more in cars than in the gym, and so I think that is the primary. People have switched essentially from radio and even like SM radio to podcasts.
Yeah, no,
podcasts are the new radio.
I find I don't drive that much, but and I never go to the gym. So, but I do listen to podcasts walking my dog.
Okay, I don't walk a dog, drive a car, or go to the gym, and I don't listen to podcasts.
You just make them.
Good or bad, cars. AJ, take it away.
Yes. All right. Well, welcome. Good or bad. This is the show where we talk about a big topic and decide whether it's overall good for the world or bad for the world. And cars, that's a big one. Are cars the perfect metaphor for freedom? Are they what America is all about? Or are they murderous, polluting beasts that are bringing on the climate apocalypse?
Climate apocalypse, and then the evolution of cars will bring on kind of a massive depressionary unemployment crisis.
Oh, I want to hear about that. That sounds fun.
Well, and then there's a safety factor. Are cars, safe or unsafe? Do they lead to greater crime and so on?
Right. And I want to be clear up front that I do have a pre-existing bias, and I think you do too. So let's just get those out of the way. I grew up in New York City, and so I never really fell in love with cars. I'm a terrible driver. Recently, I was driving to my cousin's wedding and listening to an audiobook about Albert Einstein, and I found Albert Einstein more interesting than the road, so I kind of swerved, then I overcorrected. I jumped the highway median into oncoming traffic, and miraculously no one was hurt. But that's
the key is, what was the book on Albert Einstein? I want to read it now.
Oh, it's Walter Isaacson's biography.
Okay.
It's dangerous. Don't read it. It's so interesting. You don't.
I don't listen to audiobooks.
You don't?
No.
What do you do?
I read them.
Okay. That's impressive.
But to your point though, you said you were a bad driver.
Yeah.
I also say I'm a bad driver, but 9 out of 10 people, and this is research, 9 out of 10 people say they're an above the median driver. And there's something called illusory superiority. So everybody thinks that in their given field, they're above average. So professors are notorious, actually. Professors surveyed, 94% think they have a higher IQ than their peers. So, but there's this cognitive bias that you think you're kind of better than you are. And driving is also really bad for us. Everyone says, "Oh yeah, I'm a really great driver." I know I'm a bad driver. Like I will kill people behind this 2-ton, 60 mile per hour weapon if I'm in charge of it.
So do you drive a lot? Do you?
I don't drive at all. I had a license. I lost it in 2002. And I've driven a little since then, illegally. And when I've tried to get a license, it is so the DMV offices are so behind the times that it's all like paper. I've been to 5 different offices in 4 different states to kind of rectify some problems I had, and there's just no way to do it. Like I cannot get a license just because of the sheer bureaucracy. It would be like a full-time job for me to try to get a license. And not that I want one, actually.
Right.
I was going against my will. I don't want one.
Well, are we allowed to know what happened in 2002?
Yeah, it was nothing. I was in Connecticut, and there was like a stop. So I was like midnight coming back from a friend's house, and there was a stop sign hidden by bushes, and I went past it. And the cop pulled me over, and he's like, "Sorry about this." And then that would have been it. I could have just paid and kept my license, but I'm really bad at paperwork and follow-up, as everybody who works with me knows. And I just never paid that fine until 15 years later. And, so then my license was suspended. Then they kept finding older and older, speeding tickets that I never paid the fines for. And so Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, nobody communicates with each other. In order for me to get a license now, I have to get letters from all these states, and then I have to start from scratch, like taking the driver's test, taking the written exam, the driving exam, and I'm just not going to do it ever. Because also, I'm a bad driver. I've been in accidents ever since I was 17 years old. Can I tell you one story? Quick story.
Hell yeah.
One time, I was visiting my dad in New Jersey in the hospital. He was in a coma after a stroke, and I was driving illegally, of course. So I was driving home from there, and I was a little disoriented, and I saw up in front of me a police barricade for some reason, and I got really paranoid. I thought they're going to catch me driving without a license. I'm going to go to jail. So I quickly made a right turn, and all of these police officers started running after me, like, "Hey, stop!" And I stopped. And the police officer looked in and said, "Do you realize you're going the wrong way down a one-way road?" And I said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I just got lost." And he said, "Well, let me see your license." And I said, "I left it at home. I'm sorry. I was visiting my dad in the hospital." I used my dad as an excuse. And then he said, "Well, let me see." He said, "You've got to be kidding me. You're driving the wrong way down a one-way road. You don't have your license. Let me see your, whatever, registration and permit." And it was my ex-wife's car, so it was in her name. And he's hitting his head. He's like, "You have got to be kidding me. You're driving the wrong way down a one-way road. You don't have a license, and this is not your car." And then he said, "You know what? Just go. I cannot deal with this right now." And then I still was lost, so I turned around and I said, "Excuse me, can you just give me directions how to get back to New York State?" And he's like, "You stop it. Just get out of here."
So if you're going to break the law, break a lot of laws so it's too much.
Give them too much paperwork.
All right. I love that. That's a very useful life hack. That is funny.
Here, one more life hack. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no.
If you are stopped for a speeding ticket, you and I were just talking about a mutual friend of ours, Joey Coleman, who won that speaking contest. Joey Coleman gave me this advice, which is that if you were, and he's a lawyer, ex-FBI, he said if you're stopped for a speeding ticket, he almost always gets out of it by just saying, he complies with everything. He's really nice. You keep your hands on the wheel. You respond to everything that the officer says. Don't admit guilt, but don't deny it, whatever. But then he says, say to the officer, look, I just need to inform you by law that I am going to contest this in court. And the police officer, the worst thing you can do to a police officer is make them stay off the road and hang out in a court. So the police officer usually just gives them a warning after that.
Really?
Yeah, that's his life hack.
Interesting. Now, he is a white man, so we got to keep that in
Right.
mind.
We don't know if in any other context.
Right. But I have never had the cojones to do that.
And he flashes his old FBI badge, so that must help.
Well, there you go. I got to get one of those.
They're for sale.
Oh, really? Yeah, I guess so. Everything is. Speaking of stop signs, this is how I know I'm a bad driver, is sometimes I will stop at a stop sign and wait for it to change. And and then it'll be like 3 minutes and I'm like, oh, it's not, I mean, it'll rust eventually, but that's going to be like 50 years.
Do you think that's a mental deficiency? That sounds like more than just being a bad driver. Like something you're making it's always a question about whether certain types of mental illness are superpowers because they allow you to think outside of the box, or if they're actually problems that need to be dealt with. Like you connected the dots in this strange way between traffic lights and stop signs, and your brain would not dissuade you.
Yeah, no, it was a category error. Yeah, and I would say I'm sure it represents something deeper. So yeah, I'm glad for America that I rarely drive.
Well, and at least you do not fall for the cognitive bias of illusory superiority.
No, which I've also heard called the Lake Wobegon effect, because everyone in Lake Wobegon is above average.
Garrison Keillor, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I would recommend we start with the good of cars. Cars have lots of good things.
And they're totally correlated. This is an obvious thing, so it's not part of the good, but they're totally correlated with economic development in countries as people transport things faster and more and more. Companies have a much bigger labor pool because it's not just who's a few blocks away; it's who's within 100 miles. So.
Right? Yeah, they are all about. They are definitely contributing to the economy of the world until the economy totally crashes because of the climate apocalypse.
Or because of cars.
But there are plenty of good things. Here, let me just start with a couple random ones. One, now I don't feel this, but the joy of driving. Some people just love the pleasure of getting behind a wheel. And I found this quote. This goes back a long way. 1900, there was an automotive magazine, and the writer said, "It is recognized that the main excuse for speed mania is the desire to feel new sensations and to prevent the emptiness of a purposeless life." So I thought that was a lovely little quote. Now, when they did Speed Mania in 1900, literally we're talking 5 miles an hour. But for them, that was exciting.
And let me ask you, because I love that quote, and you and I both probably don't relate to it, but I could see why people would relate to it because it was such a new experience. At that time, wasn't there a fear of a speed limit on the human body? That if a car went a certain speed, that could be bad. Maybe this was more related to planes, but I thought even with cars, they thought if cars increased to a certain speed, that the human body wouldn't be able to handle it.
That's fascinating. I actually heard a very interesting interview with the editor of Car and Driver magazine. He was on the How Do We Fix It podcast, and he was like raving about how driving is the best part of his day and how the ability to drive long distances is linked to American exceptionalism because we all come up with our best ideas while driving. And I looked into it. Gertrude Stein did say that she came up with her best ideas while driving. She would drive around farms and look at cows.
Okay, well, let me ask you a serious question about this then.
Yeah.
What was Gertrude Stein's best idea?
A rose is a rose is a rose?
Really? That's her?
Isn't that her? I don't know. Let's see. Maybe.
I'm not sure she's known for her great ideas. like most writing I've read from her is not my favorite.
Rose is a rose is a rose is a rose. There you go. 4 roses. I only thought it was 3. See, she's like more of a genius than I ever
know,
thought.
4 is much
That's
better
like
than 3.
25% more ingenious than.
It's like Jane Austen did 3 roses, but who would have thought of 4?
Wait, I
And
have.
don't you think most people come up with great ideas? Like in the shower is a known place where people come up with great ideas.
Well, we've talked about this because that doesn't work for me. I have to, inspired by you, partly, carve out 15 minutes a day just for idea generation, just for brainstorming.
That's
Do you
smart.
still do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Every
Yeah.
day.
But do you also come up with ideas in the car or in the shower?
Well, I'm never in a car, well, except an Uber.
What about a shower? We're hoping.
But shower, yeah, definitely. But I don't consider them done ideas in terms of ideation until I've written them down. So I write down 10 ideas a day as a practice every day.
I love that. And by the way, I also remember more recently maybe this is more impressive to you than Gertrude Stein. Stephen Colbert, I heard an interview with him, and he talked about how the network offered him a car service because he lives in New Jersey. And he said no, because he finds that driving is when he comes up with his best ideas. There's something about your conscious mind is involved with making sure you don't crash, and it releases the non-conscious mind. Obviously, it works for some people, not us.
Well, Howard Stern, this is related, as Howard Stern has said, he has a driver take him to work, and he lives, I guess, in Long Island, or he did when he wrote this, that he meditates on his commute. So there's different things to do on your commute. Podcast, idea generation, meditation if you have a driver.
Yeah, don't meditate if you are driving. That would be my suggestion.
At least not the closing your eyes sort of meditation.
Yeah, exactly. Keep your eyes open. All right. I have another positive. Do you have one you want to throw in, or you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, cars allow us to have more opportunities in life. You can drive from New York to California in 3 or 4 days. You can take jobs that are 100 miles or more away from your home. So instead of living in an urban city where you're tightly packed in with millions of others, and there's potential for more crime and less space for your family and no yards, you could live in a home with a nice yard. Every family with an acre, sort of saying, and so there's. You can argue cars have increased to a quality of lifestyle. I think that's also the bad, which we can get to later. But cars have definitely increased opportunities for both the worker and the employer in terms of, like I said earlier, having a higher pool to draw upon. And
yeah, I know, I agree. I mean, I think you touch on two things there, Tim, because there's the freedom. So you have much more freedom where you live. And without cars, you wouldn't have the suburbs, which, of course, the suburbs have their good and bad parts.
But I would argue, by the way, the good and bad of cars, the good and bad of suburbs, the good and bad of suburbs has to be discussed, because suburbs are intimately connected to cars.
Yeah,
I think what's interesting here is kind of the good of cars is almost sort of obvious, creates opportunities, is fun to some extent. It allows for also greater choice. So you can, instead of going to your grocery store across the street, you can go to the grocery store or the mall 10 miles away, and you can have greater choice of goods that you buy. So this has a deflationary effect on the economy when you have more choice, and that in general is good for the economy as well. So I think I think people just assume there's a lot of goods. That's why there's 268 million cars on the road in the U.S., 6.3 million cars sold last year. In general, it's not like people are saying cars are bad and they're avoiding them. Everybody's got a car. Everybody's got 2 cars.
Right. But I do think you touched on a great point, which is the freedom. I think that is the central metaphor of American cars, this idea of freedom, being able to go when you want, where you want. I found an Elon Musk quote about why he thinks cars are great and public transportation, in his words, sucks. So let me just read that real quick. I think public transport is painful. It sucks. Why? Why do you want to get on something with a lot of other people that doesn't leave where you want? That doesn't leave where you want it to leave, doesn't start where you want it to start, doesn't end where you want it to end, and it doesn't go all the time. It's a pain in the ass. That's why everyone doesn't like it. And there's a bunch of random strangers, one of whom might be a serial killer. And so that's why people like individualized transport.
Yeah, I don't know, because the benefits of the bus is that people who aren't on one extreme billionaires like Elon Musk, or even, middle class workers, people who are more impoverished have a chance to have the same opportunities that people with cars have. So I can still live in the suburbs, but take a bus. When I first working in New York City, I lived with my parents for only a week or two in New Jersey, but I took a bus into work because I wasn't going to drive a car.
I was thinking this idea of freedom and cars, it's inspired so much music and art. I mean, it's so American. You've got Bruce Springsteen, my wife's favorite singer. Bruce has just so many great car and driving songs. Here's one. I'll just read you a stanza from his Cadillac Ranch. Eldorado fins, white walls and skirts rise just like a little bit of heaven here on earth. Well, buddy, when I die, throw my body in the back and drive me to the junkyard in my Cadillac.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, but I did learn this in Vanity Fair. He talks about how he actually was not a good driver and didn't get his driver's license until he was in his 20s. So you and him have a lot in common there.
Well, the other thing is, and Bruce Springsteen is it's interesting you bring up. He's very much a voice of, let's call it, the American working class, and American from born in the USA, but working class from many of his songs and his background. And trucks, I mean, truck driving, trucks are a kind of car, it has vastly improved the economy because it allows you to transport goods from coast to coast. It employs 3.5 million workers, plus probably an additional 5 to 10 million who work in truck stops, motels, and so on along the way. So there's probably about 12 million people overall in the U.S. relating who are employed because of the trucking industry. Not to mention all the benefits we get from this is the most economical transportation of goods. That's why Walmart is fully stocked all the time, as opposed to only going to your local mom and pop grocery store, which has its ups and downs, but overall it's allowed us to feed a lot more people. So, I mean, again, for the economy, cars, trucks, everything seems to be directly correlated to the growth in the American economy, which is the largest economy in the world, despite being only 3% of the world's population.
Right. I mean, I remember when I was doing my book on the origins of coffee, I spent some time with truckers, and it really changed my mind, because when I do drive and a truck passes by me, I'm always like pissed off. It's like, you guys, what is so annoying? They're going to drive me off the road. But if I want my coffee, then I better be thankful for trucks.
Yeah, and again, it's so natural to come up with the goods, the good things about cars and automotives, that it almost seems contrarian to come up with the bad. But the bad is very important, because I think it's also moving more into the front page of the news, what in a variety of ways, whether it's climate or economy or electric cars and so on. It's starting to be part of the national debate, whereas it never was before, really.
Yeah, you're right. It wasn't like cars were controversial, but I do feel that swinging that way. Like, cars are in trouble. Cars and what else? What else is on? Cars and vaping. Like, those are both getting some bad press.
The bad has not yet outweighed the good in the public eye, just because, again, 6.3 million cars sold last year.
Right.
Everyone drives except you and me, and a few others in New York City and other cities.
Right. Can I give two more positives about cars, and then we will start to trash them, which I always enjoy. One, historically, cars helped usher in the sexual revolution. Apparently there were two sexual revolutions, one in the 20s and one in the 60s. So
I did not know this.
Yeah, that's what my research turned up. The one in the 20s was definitely all about cars and, going to neck and giving you a place to do your thing. And actually, if driverless cars take off, that is going to be like usher in the new revolution for sex in cars, because you don't have to drive. You can have sex all the time, like you can
In your car.
In your car. And BMW, I Googled sex in cars, and some interesting stuff came up. But relevantly, BMW has a new ad strongly hinting that in-car sex, like if you buy their driverless cars in the future, you'll get to have sex with a hot woman or a hot man.
Well, I think a lot of car ads are like that. Like you see the car, zipping along the highway, dust flying out, and then some beautiful woman or, some beautiful guy with a beautiful woman get out of the car. And so there's this impression that if you get their car, you're going to be having, or more luck, with your relationships.
Absolutely. I think that is the central thesis to most car ads. This one is just a little more on point in that you will get to not only have sex, but have sex in the car.
I wonder if there'll be built-in beds in automated cars. Just like right now, the biggest car in the world is they retrofitted this Eldorado Cadillac, I guess. It's so big, it's ridiculous. I forget how many feet it is big, but it has a helipad in the back. You can land a helicopter on the car. There's a jacuzzi, and it requires 2 drivers.
Come on. Who has it? Like a Saudi sheik or something?
I don't know. I saw a picture of it parked in New York City, so I don't know who has it.
All right. We got to go riding on that. That sounds excellent. All right. And then finally, I think it not only gives people joy to drive cars, it gives them joy to own them and work on them. And I found this quote by Roland Barthes, the French author. And he said, this is a couple decades ago, but he said, I think cars today are the exact equivalent of the great Gothic cathedrals, the supreme creation of an era, conceived with passion by unknown artists, consumed in image, if not usage, by whole populations, which appropriate them as a purely magical object. So he's saying cars are the Gothic cathedrals of the present.
Well, think about the image of the 50s teenager, the James Dean style teenager. You always picture them, sleeves rolled up, working on their car. It was considered like a coming of age when a man learns how to fix his car. Now, of course, cars are computerized. Basically, a car is a big computer with a car app in it.
Right.
And that's what a car is. And, my worry there, this is neither good or bad. This is just a worry. But you know how phones, like it used to be a car, you could say, my car has been around 20 years and, you just keep fixing it. But I'm worried with these computerized cars, you can't really fix them because they're so sophisticated. And I'm worried they have an expiration date, just like phones have been known to have. Like when the next version comes out, your car dies. Now, technology is such that, for instance, with a Tesla, you can get an update now on your car over the air. Like they'll wirelessly send you an update, but maybe not in all cases. I'm worried about that a little bit with the rise from the classic, mechanical car that any teenager could fix to these computerized cars where you have to be essentially an AI engineer to fix it.
That is fascinating because I just listened to an interesting interview with someone from the Right to Repair movement, and it's exactly what you're talking about. Now, technology, including cars, is so complicated, you can't just break it apart. And so we ditch it, and it becomes e-trash, and you just get a new one. So there's a whole movement of people who say, you got to make the screws easier. You've got to sell spare parts because it's better for it's better for the environment. You save money. It's not better for the companies that can sell you a new gadget every 6 months, but everyone else it's good for.
But I think we're kind of in this transition period because what's going to happen is the days of like our grandchildren are going to say to us, I can't believe you owned a car. Like there's not going to be the days of car ownership are probably going away, and there'll probably be just robot cars that it's just this massive sort of car on demand. Right now, 96% of the time, cars, these 268 million cars are vacant. So, but there'll come a time with the automation of cars where a car will drop you off at work, then go and pick up someone who needs a car, drop them off at the school, go to the next person, drop them off at the gym or whatever. And, cars will not be owned by any one person, but, just kind of this mass, a much smaller car, much fewer cars on the road, but providing as many services and nobody needs to own them.
Right. Which I think, again, of course, good and bad, but overall good. I think the sharing economy, like I'm too old, so I get annoyed about sharing things. And I always, I'm a total hypocrite because I always tell my kids, oh, sharing is the most important thing. And I fucking hate to share. So, but I think you're right. That is the future of cars, and it's probably overall a good thing.
Probably, although there is the counter argument, and like you said, there's always good or bad. There's the counter argument, and I think we'll get to this more fully. But many people will lose their jobs. The car industry is a $100 billion, or sorry, just the trucking industry is like $100 billion industry. Car industry is much bigger, and a significant part of GDP has to be will disappear and needs to be figured out. As cars, maybe we'll get 1/5 the amount of cars on the road, and no need for car drivers anymore. No need for many people related to the car industry. So I think, the world's going to change, both good and bad. Companies will be more efficient, but perhaps tens of millions of people will be out of a job, starting with 3.5 million truck drivers in the next few years.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have the universal basic income, and we'll all live lives of pursuing our hobbies and surfing and doing VR. That may not happen, but that's the hope. You mentioned teens and the idea of everyone working on their car, and I think that relates to this idea of custom cars, which gives people so much pleasure. And if you Google custom cars, weirdest custom cars now, it is just a fantastic image.
Really? What's the weirdest custom car you saw?
Well, there was a Kiss themed one, like a huge Gene Simmons tongue coming out of the hood. There was a Zeus, like a Dr. Zeus car, a Zeus car.
Oh my God, that must be great.
There was a Hummer with tank treads. So if it wasn't military enough now, but people love, it's an expression of individuality. And it's also a way to say what tribe you're part of. If you have a Tesla, you're part of one tribe. If you have a Subaru, you're part of another tribe.
And I guess there's this element to your point. There's this element of design and art that's probably going to go away as we standardize automated cars, because some people like the design, almost liquidy feel of a Porsche. Some people like, the more blockish American cars. Some people like Rolls Royce. Or for instance, if you look at the yellow cabs in today's New York, I really appreciate the design now of 1960s yellow cabs. Like, I think they're beautiful.
Which were those? The checker ones?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, those were nice.
Yeah.
Did you ever ride those? Are you old enough?
I rode. There were in the 90s. There were 2 still legal checker cabs in New York, and I rode in one of them.
Did you use the rumble seat or whatever it was called?
Oh, I don't remember that.
They had a stool that was like a fold out stool, and so you could sit on that instead of
kind of like the London cabs now.
Oh, is that what they have now?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it seemed incredibly dangerous, but but back then no one cared. All right, well, so yeah, cars are fantastic. End of episode.
But wait, we haven't done the bad.
Oh, I was just kidding.
Oh,
because I can't wait for the bad.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and or cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players, and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So, I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy.
There's an intermediate though too.
What is that?
The intermediate is cars cause extra human deaths, right? So I think 10 years ago, 10 years ago there was about 1 million deaths a year around the world. Maybe 60,000 or so deaths a year in the U.S. from car accidents. But that number has been going steadily lower year over year since they made it since the laws requiring people to use seatbelts. So seatbelts do save lives.
Yes, I would agree with that.
So there was only, I think, 33,000 deaths, motor vehicle deaths last year in the U.S., down from like 60,000. And it's all ever since they mandated that everyone must put on their seatbelt. The reason I put this in the intermediate category between good or bad is that deaths are going down. And so potentially they could hit zero. But I think what's going to happen is automated cars are going to be so sophisticated that
I do believe that evidence shows that if we can perfect these driverless cars, then accidents will go way down. But that's going to be a hard sell to people, I think, because, the first, anytime that there's anytime a self-driving car slams into a lamppost, that's front page news. Whereas the 5,000 car accidents a day, no one pays attention to.
But I think that's part of the transition of any new technology.
Right.
Like if there was credit card identity theft in 1997 from an e-commerce store, that was front page news. Now, of course, it's an everyday event, but it's not news. Billions of dollars are transacted every day on the internet. So it's just part of the transition that we'll focus on it for a while. Then people will realize, oh, this is pretty good. Suddenly everyone's using automated cars. It won't be news anymore.
Right. I'm with you.
And by the way, they'll be able to compare the numbers statistically. 30,000 deaths versus 12 deaths.
Right. But I did actually look up the history of car accidents. I mean, first of all, this is from a New Yorker article. The article, by the way, is called "Was the Automotive Era a Terrible Mistake?" And
great article for this podcast.
There you go. And because, the answer was not like, nope, it was all wonderful. It was like, yes, it was probably a terrible mistake.
Why?
Well, for all these reasons we're about to tell you. One is, of course, the deadliness. Since 1899, more than 3.5 million people have died in traffic accidents in the United States, and 80 million have been injured. I mean, that is a really remarkable statistic.
What's the worst accident you've been in?
Well, it was that one where I jumped the median, but
no one got hurt.
No one got hurt. Some guy rammed me from behind, and I broke my finger. So nothing too bad. What about you?
Did you sue for billions because you're a writer?
And what about you? Your worst car accident?
I was 18. I was coming back from a chess lesson, meaning I was very popular with girls in my high school, and I had just for the first time beaten my chess instructor. I remember the game to this day. I had a beautiful queen sacrifice. Even he was surprised. He was the U.S. champion a year later. And I was driving home. I was thinking about it. Went right through a stop sign. Hit a station wagon driven by a guy who was in his 60s. I was 18. And we both twirled around and around and around. It was on a corner in an intersection. All 4 fences of the 4 houses on that corner were all smashed somehow by our cars. I went through the window and broke the window, but I ended up somehow without a scratch. Like I bounced back into the car. The car was smashed to pieces, but I had 0 injuries. And the other guy, unfortunately, broke his leg. And I was very regretful and basically very rarely drove ever again after that.
And did you have to pay him like $1 million?
Insurance companies paid, but yeah, we had to go to court and everything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And was he forgiving, or he was like you?
No, after the court case, we noticed he followed us all the way home to see where we lived and then drove off.
That's scary.
Yeah, it was a little scary. So we drove around the block a few times because we noticed him following us. My father was driving, and then eventually went home and he whizzed off.
Huh.
So,
wow, that's disturbing.
But I do feel bad about it. It was completely my fault.
All right. Well, I think he's probably dead now. So,
yeah, it's 30 years later, 30 some years later.
You're fine. I did in my research read about the first fatal car accident, which I thought was very interesting. 1869. It was a steam-powered vehicle, steam-powered car. And the victim was thrown from the car. Her name was Mary Ward, and the tire ran over her neck, and she died. But she was a fascinating character. She was a scientist, a female scientist in England, and very successful. And trivia, fun fact, she is the great-grandmother of Lala Ward, who played Time Lord Ramona on Doctor Who, and is also the ex-wife of Richard Dawkins.
Oh my gosh.
So there you go. Well, I do think that we underestimate just how dangerous cars are. I mean, we all know it, but I remember after 9/11 and everyone was afraid of flying. And I believe it was in Nassim Taleb's book where he tried to calculate how many more people were killed because they all started driving instead of flying. And driving is infinitely more dangerous than flying, even after 9/11. So we're totally irrational and underestimate how deadly these things are.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Nassim Taleb or Freakonomics. It might have been in the book Super Freakonomics
Good
that
call.
9/11 ended up with more indirect car deaths because people stopped flying, and the death rate on planes is much lower.
You're absolutely right. It was Freakonomics. So sorry, Stephen, and sorry, Nassim. So what should we go on to?
The bad and the ugly.
Well, that was kind of bad, like killing 3.5 million people. But
Yes,
but we'll do even more.
But I do think the rise in automated cars, we're seeing evidence even with this first wave of technology that those deaths can quickly go to trivial amounts.
Yeah, I agree. That is one of the great promises. But you are going to get a lot of pushback from traditionalists who are
For a while.
Yeah,
Like
for a
any
while.
transition.
Right. But I'm with you overall. All right. So now some other bads So here are, pollution, like end of the world, apocalyptic climate change, and cars are one. There are many culprits, but cars are up there.
Right. So cars account for about 20% of the world's carbon emissions and other types of emissions that affect the environment. And, whether or not, you're a believer or a disbeliever in climate change, at the very least, cars and the output from these internal combustion engines and fossil fuels and so on, and create massive pollution in cities. And it's not just carbon emissions; it's also when cars hit the road, they're heavy enough that it sprays dirt and parts of the road everywhere in minuscule amounts that also hit the environment.
So is that bad for the lungs? Is that the problem?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, my research said in America, it's 17% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. So it's not everything. You've also got cattle and planes and all sorts of other problems. But if you eliminate cars, you'll be taking a step in the right direction.
What's interesting there too is if you live in a suburb, you have a bigger carbon footprint, which means the amount of carbon emissions you're accountable for than if you live in a city, in part because if you live in a suburban area, you're driving a lot more.
I know. That makes me feel superior.
The downside for you is that you live in close proximity to probably, 1,000 rats.
I'm okay with that.
As long as you don't see them.
Yeah. But I do see them. I see them in the subway all the time.
Oh yeah, kind of scurrying on the tracks.
I find it's a good exercise in reframing because I'm just like, it's wildlife. Animals, they're just animals. And and I have had lots of mice in my apartment and I try to reframe them as pets. Like, oh, they're just pets that I don't have to feed.
How do you reframe cockroaches?
Also very small pets.
Good for you that you could do that.
It's not successful, but I try.
But related to this and related to the environment, although I want to hit the pollution thing again, is the rise in cars is directly correlated to the rise in suburbs. So because now you can, again, as we stated before, you could drive 30, 40 miles comfortably to work. You don't have to live in the city. It used to be you couldn't work in New York City if you lived in Trenton, New Jersey, for instance, which is 70 miles away. But with the rise of cars, you can potentially commute from large distances, and this has actually damaged the environment in interesting ways, which is that you cut down these forests, the wildlife has to find somewhere to, so you destroy these huge areas of land, hundreds or thousands of square miles around every major city, where wildlife could no longer live because people put their fake lawns and their swimming pools and their big McMansions and, for mile after mile. And there's no real coordinated public transportation system because everything is spread out so far. So you need cars and you need larger plots of land. And, so again, you bring up wildlife, reframing that as New York City wildlife, but wildlife in general has been, and that related to the environment, it's not only pollution, it's kind of the natural indigenous species of every area, suburban area is gone because of cars.
By the way, this brings up a little point. I want to pay tribute to my family because my grandfather was actually a transportation rebel. He was a lawyer in New York, and he was very much, this was like 30 years ago, he was in favor of congestion pricing, and he wanted the subways to be free. He wrote op-eds in the New York Times advocating free subways as a civil right.
Which probably could have been paid for by congestive pricing.
That was his argument. And some people hate congestion pricing, so I apologize on behalf of my grandpa to them. But I do think it would be interesting to see if his system would work better. It might.
And again, it's not off the table with the rise in automated cars because they'll just automatically pay to pay, and they'll know because they're all communicating with each other. They'll know when there's congestion or not in ways that humans won't necessarily know.
So it wouldn't be based on the district. It would be based on whether you're in traffic.
Yeah.
Oh,
so it'd be kind of a dynamic pricing based on actual congestion.
I didn't know. I love it.
I want to mention on the environment, originally cars were great for the environment because particularly in urban areas and there was horse manure in the streets. The global warming of 1900 was the fact that, and this was talked about also in Super Freakonomics, the global warming of 1900 was the fact that there was 2 or 3 feet of horse manure every day left on the streets of New York City. And they were starting to figure out, how are we going to shovel all of this away every single day? And they thought that within 10 years, New York City would basically collapse because of
under the weight of manure.
Essentially, yeah, that there would be so much manure, New York City would be unlivable and unworkable. And cars, it goes to show you that we sometimes don't always know the solutions to complicated problems. So the solutions we're thinking of now for major societal problems might completely change by inventions over the next 5 to 10 years. But cars eliminated that entire problem.
Right. And caused other unintended consequences. But yeah, I do remember reading about the chin-high walls of horse manure on the streets of New York. It is just mind-boggling. If you traveled back 100 years, can you imagine what New York smelled like? It's just, there are problems with New York, but I am thankful it is not the literal shit show that it used to be.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. I looked into this a little because I wanted to know, are horses or cars better for the environment? And I found one source. It was the Science Museum, the Exploratorium. And it talked about if you have one horse with one rider and one car with one rider, horses are actually worse in terms of greenhouse emissions because you've got to feed the horse and the horse burps and farts and all that. So if cars were never invented and everyone had their own horse, we would still be screwed greenhouse emission wise. If you start adding people into the cars, so if you have 2 people in a car, cars are actually more efficient greenhouse wise than horses, and 3 and 4. So yeah, cars redeem themselves if you have more people in them.
But I think this all lends into, we're kind of on the tail end of kind of, cars that we drive, and we're on the beginning of an era where first there's going to be, our cars, we're going to buy a Tesla and it's going to be automated, but then there's going to be just robot cars that we don't own that are driving us around. And on the one hand, probably those are going to be electric or hybrid, so there's not going to be as much, fossil fuels and carbon emissions going into the air. There's arguably going to be other environmental issues, like the cost of creating a heavier battery will make use of fossil fuels, at the plant. And so that it's unclear the environmental changes, but it seems like electric cars will be better for the environment, which is why people are buying hybrids right now and Teslas and so on. And then also those cars will be heavier, so potentially more damage to the roads and, again, spitting up bad dust for the environment. But so and with automated cars, it could be better for psychology. Like you'll be able to sleep in the back of your car or read or whatever while you're commuting 90 miles to work. You could potentially have a longer commute. So we didn't mention that the longer the commute is reversely correlated to happiness. So the longer you commute to work, potentially the unhappier you are, but that statistic might change if you're just sleeping in the back of your car because it's an automated car. We talked a little bit about automated cars, but then there's the economic advantage is that hundreds of billions of dollars in efficiencies will be created as trucks are automated. So you don't have to, trucks stop every 11 hours, so the truck drivers could rest. With automated trucks, they'll never stop. So you'll get your goods that much faster. The estimate is it'll save about $120 billion in the trucking industry, and there'll be much fewer cars and trucks on the road, so that helps the environment and so on. But as mentioned before, there's so many people related to employed supporting the trucking industry, including the truck drivers, that this could have a massive negative effect on the economy. Despite these hundreds of billions of dollars in efficiencies, it's expected, this is coming from Andrew Yang, he expects between 3 and 3.5 million truck drivers could lose their jobs in the next 5 to 10 years. And these are people who, most of them don't have a college degree. 94% are male and middle-aged and might not have the time to transition to new, harder skills because there's not going to be jobs opening up with equivalent skills. And he's worried this could be, massive revolution because this could be the start of it.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with him when he talks about how most people in America are obsessed with immigration and how that's going to affect the job market. But automation is going to have a much bigger impact, and that's going to put out so many more people out of jobs.
There are other equivalent things, though, like the rise of ATM machines. Everyone was worried there would be no more need for cashiers. Instead, the banks got so profitable because of ATM machines. There's now, they started introducing new services, and now you have a bank on every corner, increasing the need for tellers. So it actually created more tellers, the rise of ATM machines, despite the fears. And, of course, the downfall of horses, the rise of cars, all the people who drove horses were out of a job, but then they ended up driving cabs or whatever. Andrew Yang's point, I guess, is that truck drivers don't have an equivalent job market to go to. They truly will be unemployed, hence the need for, his arguments, hence the need for a UBI. I think it's unclear, but it's just, that is a potential catastrophe of automated cars. But in general, whenever there's been huge efficiencies and increased productivity in the market, that's usually been a good thing for the economy. So, and it's created gaps that we weren't aware of where there would be a need for employees, but it's unclear if we'll need any employees as automation increases. But that's kind of a topic for another good or bad.
Right.
But specifically with cars, Andrew Yang's point is that the problems of automation will start with the rise of self-driving trucks.
Yeah, no, that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Before we wrap up, can I bring up one other negative of cars?
Yes.
And this was from an article in Vice. The writer made this point, and the article was, again, like, why I hate cars. And it was, as he put it, cars turn you into assholes, which I think is an interesting point, because road rage is a real thing. Like, when someone cuts me off, I really get pissed off. And I think a lot of it has to do with I can't see the other person's face. Like when you're in the sidewalk and someone accidentally cuts you off, they turn around and they shrug like, sorry,
Or you could get into a fist fight, but you won't pull out a gun and start shooting at cars on the LA highway.
But yeah, it's so impersonal. It's just this big hunk of metal, and it brings out the worst in us.
To some extent, it's like a real life Twitter. So, but the benefit of Twitter is that, okay, in cars on the highway and Twitter, everybody's anonymous. So you get this unusual rage that you wouldn't have, like you say, face to face. But on Twitter, I can't pull out a gun and shoot someone. But the problem with road rage is there actually is, people kill each other. You can't kill someone through a tweet. But with a car, you're first off, you're driving in essentially a weapon, and you could have a weapon inside that weapon, as well. So I think I'm looking at the rise of road rage incidents. I'm looking at a graph right now. Are year over year, it goes up every single year. So
Really?
it's not in the millions or the thousands, it's in the hundreds. But there was basically 800 road rage incidents in 2017.
I love that analogy that cars are like Twitter.
It's like a live Twitter.
But worse, because
Yeah.
you can actually do physical damage. It'll be fascinating to see how self-driving cars affect road rage. Will the robots get in fights?
Well, well, there's actually a lot of software in place so they don't. So for instance, one is they're a lot more able to anticipate cars that are nearby, so there's no accidental brushes of other cars and hitting someone from behind accidentally while you're on the phone or whatever. There's and even for parking, they'll adjudicate the two, because the cars are talking to each other. They'll adjudicate who fairly earned this parking spot. There'll be rules for this built into the software.
Although I did hear an interesting debate about who makes the rules. And for instance, you've got to program an algorithm. If your self-driving car is going down the highway and there's an old lady and then a 10-year-old, like which one is?
And it's too late to swerve. Yeah, this is kind of a classic automated car problem.
Right, it's the trolley problem,
Yeah.
basically. And so who does the the self-driving car choose?
I have never been in a situation where I'm driving and suddenly, out of nowhere, one lane has an old lady and the other one has a baby.
That's because you don't drive. It happens to me like every other day. Well, this has been a lot of fun, and we have come to no conclusions whatsoever. Well, what do you think? What do you think? Cars, good or bad?
I think cars good and getting better, but I think it's worth questioning the rise of automation on this first kind of the front line of automation, which is going to be these 3 million truck drivers that the country can't afford to have out of work. So really the good or bad is going to be, I kind of think the environmental damage, to be honest, is going to stay the same. Except for the fact there's going to be fewer cars on the road. So instead of 200 million cars on the road, there might be 100 million cars on the road. So that'll help the environment. But per car, I don't know if there's going to be any difference. And on the economy, also on the one hand, there's going to be hundreds of billions or even $1 trillion in efficiencies ultimately by having self-driving cars and trucks. But we have to be able to take care of the people who are directly and going to be harmed by it even as early as 5 years from now. And so something like a UBI might be interesting, or we'll see if these efficiencies create new industries that will hire these people. But I doubt it, because automation's creeping into all of these newer industries as well.
Yeah. I mean, I am also, overall, I'm optimistic about the future of cars because I think the improvements are, on the whole, good, like self-driving cars and electric cars, which do emit about a quarter of the emissions that.
Although their factories will emit more, is the worry.
Right. My understanding was that it will pay off in the end, but maybe that's not
that.
true. But anyway, yeah, overall, I'm optimistic about the far future. It'll be a bumpy road, to use a car metaphor. And now.
And I think in the past, cars are probably a good thing as you start off in increasing freedom of choice of goods that we buy and foods that we buy, freedom of choice in jobs that we choose. Unfortunately, probably was a rise in divorces probably is somewhat correlated to the rise in cars, because freedom to drive out of the village you live in to marry someone else or meet someone else, and you're not limited to just the people who live a few blocks away. But ultimately, freedom was probably a good thing that cars brought to society, and it's not a surprise that the country that most quickly adopted cars, the U.S., is also by far the largest economy in the world.
There you go. So I've got to stop taking the subway and start driving more driverless electric cars, and I'll be a happier person. All right. Well, now I'm going to walk home because I want to create a low carbon footprint and feel superior.
Thank you, AJ.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.